meet you. I want to extend a great thanks to the alumni who have joined us, as well as all the students who have taken time out of your days to join us as well. I just want to give a brief introduction of each of the panelists, and then I'm going to hand it over to them to cover their background. So today we have Digon Deve joining us, who is a new business innovation manager at Logitech. He was a DIS and MECI dual in 2004. We also have Emma Feroci, who is joining us, and she is a delivery consultant at Atkin. She was a DIS and Sustainability Studies student here in 2018. We also have Sam Harrington, who is a Senior Concept Development Manager at Lego. He was a dual DIS and MECI class of 2008. We have Lucas Lappy, who is the Head of Product Design at Doris Development, and he was a DIS and MECI in the class of 2014. We have Corinne Resitar, who is a UX designer at Splunk and was a dual DIS and Comp Sci in the class of 2019. And lastly, we have Rebecca Raha Rajaparvar joining us, who is a dual MECI in class of 2015, who is a design strategy lead, brand innovation at JP Morgan and Chase. So if we could have each of our panelists go through and briefly talk about your background, who you are, what you do, where you live, and how you got there in that order as well, that would be great. So we can go ahead and start with Digon.
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. As Fiona mentioned, I graduated with a degree in 2004 with mechanical engineering and STSS at the time. And so I'm a new business innovation manager at Logitech. What that really means is my job is to identify new opportunities and sort of to help define the future of our business group. So I work for a business group that focuses on mobile device accessories, primarily iPads and smartphones. And I work with designers, engineers, marketing, business people to kind of identify opportunities that are solve user needs, are viable from a business perspective, and are feasible from a technology perspective. I've kind of had a really long path here, but I feel like this is the closest I've been to really kind of what I set out to study at RPI, which is PDI. So I was a ME design engineer for about 10 years, everything from aerospace, architectural lighting, medical devices, to 3D printing, working for startups as well as some larger corporations. From there, I was kind of pivoted into product management and did that for about 5 years. Everything from 5-person startups that we scaled to 30 people and smart toys, innovation groups at companies like Newell, Rubbermaid, and before Logitech, I was actually at Jewel Labs as one of the first product managers there. And I really kind of discovered I was interested in sort of front-end innovation and really the framing problems and understanding user needs and kind of connecting all the different aspects together. So that's kind of how I got to Logitech. And right now I'm in San Francisco. So hopefully that covers everything, I think.
Thank you. And Emma, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. So thank you guys for having me. I'm definitely happy to be here. So my name is Emma. I am currently a delivery consultant. So basically what I do is work with customers once they buy technology to actually like roll it out to them and work on training them. So as they're going through and learning the technology, understanding like, you know, what they like and don't like and being able to build new features based on that. Let's see, I got here. So before this, I was at a company called IQVIA doing similar things. I was a business analyst. So again, working with users and getting technology stood up. And then before that, I did a Hasbro co-op just before graduating. And I'm currently living in New York. And I think that's it, right? Yeah, should be all.
Thank you for that. And Sam?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm calling in from Aarhus, Denmark. I am class of 2008. I was a mechanical engineer and also PDI, the old equivalent to what's now DIS. After graduating from RPI, I joined Ecovative, the RPI mushroom material startup. I was the first full-time hire that Eben and Gavin hired and had 8 really fun, exciting, hardworking years at Ecovative, growing the business. Going from concept to a successful product in packaging with lots of corporate clients. So I spent a lot of time in business development with Ecovative. So half the time with this fast moving startup and half the time really traveling around to big companies that wanted to walk the walk and talk the talk on sustainable materials. After that, I bought a sailboat, and my girlfriend from RPI and now wife and I took a year off and went traveling, which was awesome, and didn't know what I was going to do next. But while on that trip, found a blog post that the company of my childhood dreams, Lego, was starting this new sustainable materials center and hiring 100 people and investing a lot of money into it. And I said, wow, if you asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up as a kid, I would have said I want to work for Lego. And this was like a weirdly perfect fit with what I had been working on. So I applied, had a crazy Skype interview in the middle of a storm on the sailboat, and somehow that worked. And the next thing I knew, this was 5 years ago, I moved to Europe, to Denmark, and joined Lego. So I was in a role at Lego at first, leading their efforts on sustainable packaging as part of the Sustainable Materials Center. So if you or your friends or kids in the family open a Lego set in the future and notice some changes like more recyclable packaging, recycled or bio-based materials going into it, that's something that I worked on. And but what I really wanted to do growing up was design Lego sets. And so I pivoted halfway through my time at Lego to be a concept design lead at Lego Education. So I was leading a small team of a couple model designers who have the really fun job of building with bricks all day, and a couple former teachers to develop sets for the classroom. And then most recently, about 10 months ago, I actually switched jobs again. And I'm now working for a company called Jysk, which is a Danish home goods retailer, sort of the Danish version of IKEA. So we've got 3,000 stores around the world in 52 countries, but not in the US. So none of my friends and family know anything about this, and you've probably never heard of Jysk. But over in Europe and Asia and Canada, it's a big deal. And so at Jysk, I'm back to sustainability and leading the nascent sustainability strategy and journey for Jysk. So that's me in a nutshell. It's great to meet you all. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
And Lucas, you can go right ahead.
Hey, I'm Lucas. I am a PDI Mechie grad. I graduated in 2014, had a co-op at Hasbro Toys, which was a ton of fun. And then quickly after went to a startup called Quirky, which as I'm getting older, people don't remember anymore, which is really upsetting. It was a once great crowdsourced innovation startup where we were making tons of products. It was the idea of submitting ideas online and the community would upvote it. And then the Quirky in-house staff would design, engineer, source, build the product, and hopefully it sold. Most of them did not sell, unfortunately, and company burned through $200 million and let go of 300 employees. But I was there for a year and a half, got the opportunity to build my first product, see my first product ship, and many more. They were dumb enough to let me design and engineer a product from scratch. And from that, ended up moving to Hong Kong and leading the product development team for a startup called Gobi, which came out of the ashes of what was Quirky, and got to spend what was supposed to be 3 months and turned into 3 years designing toothbrushes and eventually launching a business called Doris Dev, where we're a product development firm with offices in Hong Kong and the US. Most of us are in New York. I'm actually in Texas right now. But we are a full stack product development team. So we work with smaller startups and we work with some larger brands, primarily in their innovation departments, to actually ship products. We're not a design firm or an engineering firm. We're kind of a design firm, an engineering firm, and supply chain management company all smushed into one. So we go from design, sourcing, engineering, project management, shipping, logistics, all that. And so we have about an 80 to an 85% ship rate for the projects we actually ship, for better or worse. But we get to build a lot of really fun products, design-driven products. And yeah, I don't know if I missed anything. We're hiring interns and junior engineers. Hit me up.
Perfect. Thank you, Lucas. And Corinne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Corinne. I graduated from RPI in 2019 with PDI, DIS, and a little bit of comp sci. 2019 seems very close and very far at the same time. But yeah, so pretty much shipped straight off to San Francisco and now work for a company called Splunk. Some of these company names are a little wild, but what basically Splunk does is we're business to business, and we help customers take in logs or machine data, which like any type of technology creates, and help users and customers parse those, look for cool events, or help with security issues, anomalous events. A lot of data, pretty much. And I focus on machine learning in particular for the company. So I'm on a team of 2 and have worked with kind of across the board, PM, engineering, field, other designers, and I've shipped off some pretty cool products. Can give you more of a spiel if you want to, but other than that, yeah, I'm in San Francisco right now, but we'll be relocating in about a month back to Pittsburgh, where I'm from. So yeah, that's me.
Great, thanks, Corinne. And lastly, Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Radpavar, or Raha. I'm a graduate of 2015, DIS and MECI, and I currently work at JP Morgan Chase as a design strategy lead. And so what that means is I get to drive integrated teams, so design, engineering, and business, the human-centered design process to really design for the future of the branch experience. And I got here through kind of like a whirlwind of different internships and jobs, but I was actually really lucky to have the same internship as Lucas at Hasbro that a lot of PDI people have. I got to intern at IBM when they were first starting their design lab, which I know Izzy's at now. And so a lot of these like cool, different, disparate design and innovation jobs. And so I've been here for about 2 years, and I get to look at really anything that touches the 4 walls of the branch experience. And so thinking a lot about service model design, ATM design sometimes, layout, software, and everything in between. And so it's a really diverse job, which is really, really cool. And I think that's mostly it. I'm located in New York usually, and right now I am in Tucson, where it's about 1,000 degrees outside. But that's me.
Thank you, everyone, for covering your background briefly for us all. Next up, we'd like to sort of hear about your experience with DIS at RPI. Just sort of why did you choose DIS? Or if you have a funny moment or memory you'd like to share with us, yeah. And anyone can take it from there. There we go. I see Corinne, go right ahead.
I guess I'll go first. My college application process was a little wild. First, I wanted to go to art school, and so I was like kind of looking for like kind of more SCAD industrial design. I had this idea that I'd be an industrial designer, and then went to RPI, which was more technical, and I thought could kind of like boost my cred as a designer, having more, of a tech background. So I came into RPI as a dual with MECI, and then got to IEA and said, no, I did not want to do that. So I took intro to comp sci and pretty much switched from there. And something that I really loved about the community of PDI and DIS is how willing the professors and people were willing to work with me on my switch, and also kind of indulge me and being like the person who was off to the side trying to do UX design. And so I think during that switch of me being like, oh my God, I want to be a UX designer instead of an industrial one, really helped me as a student, and also showed me what kind of people were in the program. And so I think a lot of folks say this about RPI and about PDI in general, but a lot of the reason why I love the major and the program is because of the people.
I kind of had the same thing as Corinne. So I actually applied to 14 colleges, which is insane because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I ended up coming to RPI for engineering. And then really quickly into the first semester, I was like, oh, we just do math all day? Like we don't build stuff? It seems sus. And so me and Jarek actually ended up both applying into the program, who I'm backfilling for today because unfortunately he couldn't make it. And we didn't hear back from Dean for over 3 months. So we had to low-key stalk him to get into the program. And then he was just like, okay, I'll let you guys in. Like he relented and like let us in the program. But really also just like fell into it and was like the best thing that could have happened academically for me, at least.
So my story is probably somewhat similar to a few of you guys. I saw so I was like thinking about industrial design or arts or engineering or architecture. I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go. And then I watched the infamous shopping cart video from IDEO way back in the day. And I was like, wow, you could like make a career designing stuff and solving interesting problems. And so I actually sought out product design innovation type programs. So I applied to Stanford, didn't get in. And RPI and a couple other places. And so when I got into RPI, I was like, great, like, you know, I'll do this and figure it out. And it was interesting. I mean, when I did the program, I don't know if it's changed now, we had like 25 people or so. So it was really tight knit. We basically had all the same studio courses for all 4 years. So definitely a lot of like late night studio hijinks, you know, people playing pranks, but it's also really like a supportive environment. And I keep in touch with, you know, at least a handful of people, even though it's been many, many years now. And I'm also like finding new alums like you guys and connecting with them as well. So it was a really rewarding experience. And now I'm actually applying a lot of those things many, many years later, which is great too. So.
Yeah, thank you for all your responses. Oh, Sam, were you gonna answer?
Oh, sure. I was just gonna say, I was considering the dual PDI Mechie from the beginning, but I was a little bit intimidated by this idea of a dual major. So I started just as mechanical engineering, but ended up in my freshman year making a lot of friends in the PDI program. And I would help them on projects, and I realized it was something that was really fun and I was good at. So I ended up joining PDI in my sophomore year and playing a bit of catch up there, having, you know, two studios the same semester, which actually worked out quite well. And wasn't a problem. It was great because I got to know a much broader range of students more closely. Yeah, it was the best decision I made. I think that the skills that I got from those design classes, honestly, I've used a lot more than my engineering degree in my career. I started off doing engineering work, but today, to be honest, a lot of the engineering work is in some dusty textbooks and not in my everyday work.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm actually going to go into that more, projects and also resources. So what kind of resources did you guys use at RPI? And what is the top thing you would tell DIS students to take advantage of while they're a student at RPI?
The giant large format printer. Those things are so hard to actually find. No one has those. I think the opportunity to have a studio class where you're leaving ideally the DIS program with a built out portfolio of this is your work and this is how much you know and this is what you can do on your own is really valuable. When you look at most engineers, it's like they have a resume and that's it. And every engineer has the same resume. So having a portfolio that differentiates yourself, it shows you what you can do, what you can build, what you like, what you don't like, is super unique to DIS, and most people don't get that opportunity. So I lean in really deeply into that.
Yeah, I would just second that. You know, it's all the amazing tools in the wood shop, in the metal shop, 3D printers. You know, all this really cool tech is amazing. You know, when I went through the PDI program back 2004 to 2008, one of my critiques was that many of the professors, you know, weren't using those tools and it wasn't part of the training. And so I really took it upon myself to learn and get access to all of that. And that was really valuable. And so I was able to, you know, bring the coolest prototypes that really looked good and worked well and some of my peers sort of struggled with that because it wasn't a formal part of the training. So just RPI is really open, and there's always instructors and TAs to help you use these tools safely. So yeah, go out and make cool stuff and use your hands.
Yeah. I would add to that. So I think those are both great points. I ended up working at MakerBot many years later, and like the fact that I was exposed to 3D printing in between 2000 and 2004 was like when most people had no idea what 3D printing was. It was amazing. I would add to that, and I think a lot of people touched on this. Definitely take advantage of internships. I would say for me, and it sounds like many of us here, I basically like every year, I was like made it my goal to get an internship. So I get a chance to work at IBM Research doing like semiconductor materials exploration. I worked at Stryker Orthopedics on like wear testing and like material stuff. And then I was an intern at Boeing on component engineering. And I would say, as much as like you're hoping to find something you really love or passionate about, it's also important to find other things you don't want to do. So like in my case, I worked for all those 3 big corporations, and I was like, okay, I mean, I made a conscious decision to want to work for small companies for most of my career, with a couple of exceptions. Logitech, it's a couple of thousand people, but it's probably one of the largest companies I've worked for in my career. So, but like definitely take advantage of internships, get a diverse set of experiences, and then try to figure out what it is you want to do, because it's very easy to think like, oh, I have a degree in mechanical engineering, I guess I'm going to do ME for the rest of my life, or whatever. But it doesn't have to be that way, as you can kind of see from the different paths we've all gone on after RPI. So
Yeah, thank you for that really great advice, Deacon. One thing that's really great about this alumni panel is that a lot of us are undergrads, and so we're trying to get into the fields. Was there anything that you wish you learned in DIS before you started your career?
We don't do a great job, and I'm going to say we, because the alumni are at fault for this too, about teaching anyone how to get a job. And so there's a lot of networking, especially in design, that goes into getting a job and understanding how to present your portfolio and what visual design skills are necessary, even if you're not a visual designer, and things like that. And that's something that you guys are going to have to scrounge together yourself. And so DIS does a really great job about teaching people how to think and how to question stuff, and how to like sometimes be a very positive pain in the butt, but we don't teach you guys how to bring that into a nice, beautiful story with a bow tied on top. And so as you guys work through your coursework, think about that story that you want to tell when you go into interviews, and how you want to bring it all together visually, because that is really important. And that piece, that discussion, that interview is really what's going to get you that job or get you where you want to be.
yeah, I know things have changed a lot since I graduated, but the world, it's getting better, but people don't think in interdisciplinary and holistic ways. Largely, they're looking to basically put you into a bucket and say, are you an engineer, or are you a researcher? At least when I graduated, right? Are you a designer? Are you an engineer, or a researcher? It's taken me a long time, in particular, through a very winding path, to kind of craft my narrative and really own it and say, people would say like, hey, you worked in aerospace, now you're in medical devices. You don't know what you want, you're unfocused. Like, own that and make it a strength. Don't let people like question and say, yeah, but guess what? I know how to solve problems. I can learn a new industry, and I can take that tool set and take it to any new problem. And now that is paying off in spades, because I can go work at Facebook, or I could go work for Boeing. And those companies now understand that that diversity of experience pays off. But it takes, I think, like many of us, like you should have a clear set of goals, and obviously be open to the fact that things may not go exactly as planned, but really owning that narrative is going to be important. So that's my piece of advice.
Yeah, and I can piggyback off of that. So I think like one of the things I struggled with was like having confidence in the program, like being able to talk about it. And I remember I was getting interviews, but like being really unsure in them. And I think it came across. So one resource I would suggest is, I don't know if they're still doing it this year, but the Career Center does like mock interviews. And I did one of those. And then after that, pretty much have gotten jobs since, just learning how to speak about it. So One piece of advice they told me, like I wasn't acting confident. So he's like, you need to use phrases like, I know that, and I'm confident in that, and just talk about yourself confidently, because we do learn, they might not be, these hard technical skills, but the skills that you have are very valuable. And even the fact that you just work on projects and with people is something that I think Sam was saying, like, I've used that more in my job than, any of the other skills they'll teach you at your job. So just being able to confidently speak that you know how to work with people and on projects, I think is important.
Yeah, something I kind of want to add to this too is I was thinking about this idea of like resources and what I wish I emphasized more when I was a student, and kind of on this realm of thought in terms of articulation. I think PDI is really good at dialogue, and something that I realized now, like a little bit later into my early career, is those in-between conversations of talking to your professors and your peers about like what you're designing, like your vision, what you're trying to go for, helps you understand, how do I want to present myself in like casual conversations and conversations in general, right? And how do I articulate myself as a designer and bring people into what I'm thinking in like more clear and concise ways, and what role you want to play there. And so I wish I like emphasized a little more those office hours, those, open studios, and those kind of small conversations that I find build more trust and respect with my team than my formal design presentations do.
Thank you, everyone. And sort of on that sort of networking and how you communicate with people at RPI, we were interested to hear what type of mentors, if you had any at RPI, did you have connected, and how did they help you navigate your academic and pre-professional careers?
I guess I'll go again.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I'll just say, like, honestly, the professors were huge for me. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I think they taught me a lot about, again, this whole ascertaining who I wanted to be, and these kind of like huge life questions of what kind of designer do I want to be? Where do I want to go? What do I want to focus on? I think if you're a dual, what I would say is it's much easier to go to your more technical dual and try to get career opportunities that way, if that makes sense. That's how I got my internship and my job. I went to like a women in computing conference and got an internship through that. And I know plenty of people that do the same with different conferences for MECIs, for CompSci, for EEs. And also utilize the career fair. And it's just hard to network whenever you're trying to do this kind of walking the dance of technical and artistic, and kind of like a previous point that was mentioned is the world has gotten better in terms of it, but there is still like, it's hard for college students to break through that barrier. I think you really reach that whenever you're introduced into the design community, once you're you have like a first full-time job. I know that's not really positive, but I guess that's the feedback that I would give to folks. Yeah.
I can go. I think Dean was really influential. I know that everyone who is like an alum talks about Dean, but like Dean and Audrey and like a lot of the professors who are willing to give you that extra time, and like Audrey let me take a class I really wasn't supposed to take one time because I was just interested, and like leveraging professors in that way is really helpful. And even if they don't, like Dean and I do very different things, right? Like he's like a professor and like still very much an engineer, and I'm not at all. But having someone who could like question me and things like that was really interesting for me, at least, and helpful. Also, professional mentors, there's so many of them out there right now. Like lots of people have lots of free time and want to give it to you. There are things like ADP list, and like you can use your old bosses as mentors and things like that. And so like mentorship can come from RPI, but it also can come from outside of RPI. And sometimes that's even more helpful. So like have a mentor, look for a mentor.
Yeah. One of the things that, and I haven't quite gotten here yet, but I think someone talks about this idea of having a personal board of directors, right? These are people who have different skills, people you respect, people you look up to, or people who've been a part of your life. And so it's really important to cultivate those people who can help you can bounce ideas off of. This might sound crazy, but like in some ways the pandemic has made it easier to access people who normally would be out of reach. So an example is I was thinking about taking a certification at MIT, and I was like, why don't I just email the professor and or link in and send a message to the professor? And now we chat maybe once a month. And I'm like, I just saved myself $5,000 or $10,000. And he's like, I don't think my course is really going to help you that much. Like, what are you trying to figure out? And so don't be shy to like kind of go out there and go out on a limb and reach out to random people, because some of them may actually be surprisingly open to talking to you, especially if they take a personal interest in the kinds of things that you're doing. So.
And I'd add, like, be good peers to each other. Like, I think that was kind of the biggest point, that I think PDI didn't have a great mentorship program. I think it was very difficult. And I think engineers are weird and don't want to talk to each other in general. And I think that's what's nice about the PDI program is we're all kind of normal in a world of strange human beings. And we're all trying to get similar jobs. We're all trying to build our portfolios together. And so I think be good mentors to each other. And like, that's what I miss, like having like peers, and you're trying to build your portfolio together. You're building team projects together with the hope of both being able to, or all trying to be able to put that in your portfolio.
Yeah, I would just echo some of that. I mean, for me, there's a few professors, Dean Bert Swersey, who's no longer with us, who were really inspiring and pushed me, you know, to go beyond what I would have otherwise done. But I think peers, you know, I'm still friends with loads of people from my class at RPI, and really watching their careers develop in different directions has been really inspiring. And then I think that just to go back to something that Digant, you said earlier, those summers you have in between the years at RPI are so important for getting internships and getting experience. Find out hopefully what you want to do, but also what you don't want to do. And I think when you're an intern in a company, people are really enthusiastic to meet you and get to know you. And so you just have to really not be shy and push yourself to you know, grab lunch with people, and anytime there's free time, just pick their brains, because people at all levels of the company will really be delighted to get to know an intern, and are happy to help. There's very few grumpy people in industry that aren't gonna you know, take time to have lunch with you or chat for a bit and share what they've learned over, you know, maybe decades in the career. So so definitely, you know, use those summers to get that experience, and don't be shy, and get to know people when you're on those jobs, because really, you know, you're not going to get a whole lot done in a company in 3 months, and so you have to also think about, what am I getting out of this, and how can I learn more, you know, every day that you go to work.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know something that's always on students' mind is how to use the tactics, what tactics to use to sort of get a job. Emma, you had mentioned how to use DIS to set yourself apart. And something that we were wondering is, how do you explain the DIS program and use it to set yourself apart in job interviews, and sort of navigate the confusing threshold that it may hold?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I always describe it. Can you guys hear me fine, actually? Because I know it keeps cutting out.
Yep, you're all right.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I know a lot of the time, like, I really hone in on the project aspect of it. So I just say, like, imagine, you know, for a semester, you're taking something from start to finish. And I think that transfers well to jobs, because that's basically what you're doing. It's all like project work, at least from my experience. So I think just really focusing on, and sometimes too, I'll joke with people, because this is how I was pitched DIS, is like that it was what you think engineering is in terms of like building and creating, and it's like the more fun engineering. So sometimes I'll like throw that in there, and I think that kind of relates more in people's minds about, like, you're creating something, you know, from concept to prototype all the way through, and then just the project aspect of it as well.
Yeah, and does anyone have advice on how to showcase the DIS and the projects that you did in your resume or during job interviews?
Always bring a portfolio, even if you're not asked to, every single time.
Yeah, I would have like a one-pager that I would include with my resume. This is way back in the day, but and at least if nothing else, it would get people like, it was a provocation to get people to ask questions and be like, wow, this is not like every other engineer I come across. But then over time, you know, it gets easier. But having a portfolio helps a lot too. So.
Yeah, I think
I'm just going to be the oddball here and say that I've never used a portfolio for my jobs, but I've gone sort of away from a direct design direction, a lot of focus on sustainability. And for me, I often explain the dual major as, you know, there's this common problem of engineers and designers tend to butt heads over form versus function issues. And so this is a unique program that teaches people to do both and to understand both sides. And then it's a good segue to launch into having the sort of technical data-driven mindset and also the creative and clear communication skills. And so it gives me a chance to highlight both angles on my CV.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a skill that is really valuable in the real world is being able to, for lack of a better term, like code switch and be able to talk to different people and navigate. Like in my job, for example, I can anticipate how an engineer is going to like respond to something and what the designer wants and what the business person wants, and start to anticipate those things. And the real world is really a lot about trade-offs, right? How do you make the best decisions with the information you have? How do you bring different diverse perspectives into play and negotiate those different conflicts? And so, you know, the designer wants it to look this way, the engineering guy says it's too complicated or too expensive, and the business person wants to hit a certain margin. So being able to understand those different perspectives and say, okay, but what can we do that's going to allow us to do this, get this look and feel, hit this price point, and like, you know, here's the data to kind of support this. Like having that, like that might be one way of saying, like I can sort of negotiate and work through all these different cross-functional people and bring them to like align them and get them to a common perspective in service of whatever the goal of the organization is, right? Or the user is, right? So that's another way you may want to kind of position yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I cut you off for a second. Sorry about that. Yeah, what I wanted to add on is I saw some things in the chat, and I think a lot of people use like online portfolios now, but what I want to emphasize too, or what I feel like maybe this is more of a UX and researcher kind of trend, but how I see PDI and DIS really being like a value prop and an ad for people is kind of like what was said in the last point of being able to, you know, talk to all these different stakeholders. And so for your portfolio and whenever you're talking about projects, it's not just about the end goal, like the actual fact that like you have like a deliverable or something that you've created, but a lot about the process. People aren't just working with your ideas or your designs, they're working with you. And so I think it's important to understand, again, and showcase the fact that you can talk to all of these different stakeholders, understand their mindsets, and say, yeah, I'm a designer, but I also want to work with people and understand that there will be trade-offs. I'm not just making some visionary thing that's a pie in the sky. Like DIS really helps you be realistic and ground you. And that's how I kind of present it in terms of thinking about problems and putting some limitations on the end goal to be more realistic.
Yeah. And just to kind of build on that, right? Like design, there are very few instances where blue sky design is what you're doing. If you're a good designer, you can use constraints to empower you to actually come up with better designs, rather than looking at constraints as a negative. Use those to empower you and say, I have to hit this price point. It needs to be this light, right? And that opens up a lot of interesting solutions through those constraints, as opposed to looking at them as something to kind of be a hindrance.
And I'm going to echo that. I work on an innovation team also, and we have so many constraints, right? Like sometimes we'll think like in 10 years, what is this going to look like? But at the end of the day, those constraints always come back. And so like very pie in the sky thinking is an academic job more than it is like a professional one, if that's what you're interested in.
There is a place for pie in the sky thinking, but it's few and far between. I'll put it to you that way, probably.
Great, thank you for that. I know I can sort of be the one to think pie in the sky, so it's funny to have each of those on a different team and see those different perspectives come together. Another question we were wondering is, if you didn't have an abundance of design-centered internships specifically, because you guys, a lot of you are dual in a technical field, how did you go about building your portfolio and your project base and getting the necessary experience that employers for design companies are typically looking for?
I think every studio project is like an excuse to build your portfolio and rebuild your portfolio at the end of the year. And I saw some like chats in the comments that like their portfolios has gotten them more compliments than jobs. And like it will for so long. Your portfolio will be with you your entire life, and you should spend time updating it and redoing the projects in it. And it's not a snapshot in time. It is a function. It is proof of your ability. And so as your abilities get better and your skills get better, redo your portfolio. You're going to have really crappy stuff from your freshman year that's still going to be in it. You can just redo it. There's nothing wrong with that. And I recommend that you definitely do it. People don't necessarily want to see, when I'm looking at portfolios, I'm not that interested in like growth necessarily. I know that everyone started off doing shitty work, but redo your portfolio and show all the skills that you have learned to date.
Also, just because your internship is one thing doesn't mean it can't be like another thing that you want it to be. And so like, for instance, Lucas and I, we both interned on the same innovation team when I was at Hasbro. But then when I was there, I was like, I want to do another project. And so I got to do a service model project on like designing software for them that then Selena got to finish up. And so like, there's the opportunity for you to like take a job that might not be what you think it's going to be, and then say, okay, but give me more, but give me something else. And I want to like learn about this. And like internships are jobs ways of selling you to come back also. And so they want you to have a good time, and they'll try to find those opportunities for you more than you'll get once you're like a real adult and in a full-time job. And they're like, no, we told you to do this thing and you have to do it.
I would agree. And you also have to ask yourself, do you want to work at a company where they're going to box you into a specific role? I mean, I had a 6-month co-op at Stryker Orthopedics, and literally day in and day out, I ran the same test protocol every day. And it was like kind of sucked actually. And I'm not trying, I probably shouldn't say that, but, and so the way we were doing wear analysis was kind of weird. We were just measuring these high density polyethylene inserts. And I was like, well, what happens if particles get embedded in it? Like, they're like, well, I don't know. So I was like, why don't we look at optical scanning technologies? Like, let's look at volumetric wear. And like, this is totally outside of my job description. And like, actually, I even got dinged. They're like, why are you spending time looking at this? And I was like, I want to see if it's feasible. Like, you know, and so like a lot of people in R&D actually appreciated the initiative I took. Like, and yeah, my manager's like, you're kind of wasting time with this thing. But I was like, I don't really want to work here, so I don't really care. So, you know, feel free to like, you know, especially internships, like take some chances, meet some people. You know, you might realize you're a mechanical engineer, but you're really passionate about software. And so, you know, you might learn some things that you weren't expecting about yourself. And, you know, but treat, you know, I would say actually like apply the design process to yourself in your career. Like iterate, test new ideas. You know, I went to work in medical devices, and I was like, it's super slow, it's super risk averse. I spent like 80% of my time doing documentation. And then I went into 3D printing because it was the total opposite. Or just like, let's come up with a new idea, let's build it, let's test it in like a couple days, and let's move on to the next thing. So, you know, apply the design process to your life and your career as well. So.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
I was going to also say, what's great about jobs is you can quit them. Just remember that. So like, if it sucks, you can leave. And there's like side hustles and things like that too. And so like, jobs don't have to be perfect for you to take it. And you also, if it's not great, you don't stay.
Yeah, and that brings us exactly to our next question is, can you tell us about a time or about your experience finding a job that aligns with your values and goals? Or on the other side, have you ever had a job that doesn't align with your values? And what do you do from there?
Yeah, so for me, when I graduated, I had this choice of, do I take the boring, safe job at General Electric, and they pay for grad school, and there's a lot of smart reasons to take that, or do I take a risk with Ecovative, this crazy startup company, a couple guys who graduated a year ahead of me, growing weird stuff out of mushrooms in a basement. And I decided that was a risk I wanted to take because it aligned with my values, and I really believed in this vision of biomaterials changing the world. So it took way less salary, big risk, less opportunities for experienced mentors around me, and I'm really happy that I did, because being part of that startup meant that there wasn't someone more senior than me that was doing it, but it was, nobody knows how to do it. So Sam, are you free? Can you figure it out? Can you do it? And so I was just thrown into all these situations and had all these, strange roles beyond engineering work initially that really shaped my career path. And since then, working on sustainability at Lego and now USC has really been a passion for me. And that's something that I think that the STS department really instilled in me, that there's a lot of engineering jobs in the world making weapons and fast cars and whatnot, and if that's for you, fine, but for me, I really want to apply my career to not just get a salary, but to make the world a better place, and that's what makes me feel good. And that's been my big question when I'm deciding to take a job is like, are people going to smile when I tell them what I do and think that's cool? So that's really important to me.
Yeah, kind of going off of Raha's point earlier too. This is my first job. Is it like business to business and like not actually helping a consumer or like a large issue in the world? Yeah, that kind of bugs me. But there is such thing as like stepping stones. You don't have to change the world immediately whenever like you graduate. You're always like a work in progress, and I think it's about finding those opportunities that you feel like you can learn initially. It might be not the job that you want, but like, are you going to learn skills that will help you get to where you want to go eventually? Will it help you understand this is not the job that I want to do, and like allow you to pivot more cleanly and have more of a direct idea of what you want to do? Yeah. A job seems like the end all be all, and it's like kind of like concerning because it is like your livelihood. But in the end, you are a designer, and I think PDI teaches you can eventually get there if that's what you want. But your first job doesn't have to be the IDO, like starting a cool design firm that you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really agree with that, Corinne. I think like when I graduated, I think I wanted a job, but I also wanted to like love where I was living, and I wanted to be in New York City. So I was like, kind of just took a job that like I went to the career fair and connected with someone, and it was, crossed off the boxes. But at the time I'm like, oh, should I have accepted it just because it's like the location? But it was fine. Like I'm actually starting a new job next week. So I'm already going to be on my third job out of graduating, which only graduated in 2018. So it's like, it doesn't have to be like, I'm going to be here for 30 years. Like, I think I wish someone had told me that. So like, you learn a lot along the way about what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I think it's like, I don't know, get somewhere that's, crosses off maybe one of your major boxes after graduation, and then you can keep going from there.
Yeah. And the other thing I would add is really focus on transferable skills, right? Like, I think maybe this is not the best analogy, but like usually within 3 months of a job, you kind of know like whether you want to be there or not. Like, you're like, is this a place I want to stick around for? And probably even less time, the more experience you have over time, you're just like, within a month, you're like, okay, I'm not really getting a good vibe here. This is going to be a stop along the journey. And this is not going to be my like place I'm going to be for more than, let's say, 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, right? And so, but then focus on like, what are the things you can get out of that that are going to help position you for the next role or the next thing you want to do. So yeah, that would be another piece of advice.
So I had a question about when you're in the interview, do you guys know of any like red flags that tell you like, oh, maybe I'm not interested in this job? Or is it more like once you're there, you kind of know? What do you guys think?
My red flag is when they say that we're like a family, because then I'm like, how do people leave the office? Do they just live here? And like, it's not always a negative thing, but thinking about like the culture that you're going to be stepping into and what that, how that means for you. For me, I really like a separation of like work and my personal life, very much so. And some people don't as much. And so kind of assessing those things about yourself and then figuring out how that shows up. Something that's really niche also and specific to what I do is intake of my job is very important. So how our team gets projects really changes the kind of work I do because my job is so abstract. And so I always ask, like, how does work come in and how does work come out? Because I know that to me, that is an extremely important piece of the process. And so being able to define some of those things will help you guys then filter, like, is this a bad team? Is something going on that maybe isn't a right fit? And then some of it too is go with your gut. Like I've interviewed before places and I've been like, I don't know, something's fishy here. And then I'll talk to someone else who knows that person and they're like, red flag, don't go there. And so like, listen to yourself, you know more than you know sometimes. And like there are context clues you can pick up that make you uncomfortable, whatever.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. I think like you match the energy as well. Like I've done an interview before where it's going and then I feel like we're both so monotone. I'm like, yeah, this is like, I don't know. I just felt like it was just not the energy. Like I hate to say that because that's not a very like concrete answer, but I think you can get a feeling like if you're really getting along. Normally you interview with like a hiring manager and that's, you know, who you're working with. So if you can get along with them and it's not so much like a structured like questioning like every, you know, 5 seconds, like a new question, they're just like banging at you. Like if you can have more of a conversation, I think that's always been like where I've gone to a job and been like, okay, yeah, these are people I can actually like talk to and feel comfortable with.
This might be controversial, but I would say finding a job is like dating. You can literally do everything right and not get the job, or vice versa. It's really, there's like a non-tangible, like intangible aspect of like feeling a rapport with the other person. Because at the end of the day, it's a relationship you're building with your employer or your manager or the people you're working with. And I think you constantly have to evaluate, like, is that relationship working out for you or not? Are you getting the things that you want out of it or not? And then being ready to walk away when the answer is no. And then I think another question that's really good to ask is like, how do you measure success? Or like, what are the people who are successful in this role or at this company? Like, what are they doing? That will give you a really clear idea. So for me, this is my first innovation role. I've point blank asked my manager, like, how do you measure success? And if my manager said it's about launching 50 products a year or making $500 million in revenue, that would have been a red flag to me, because I would say then basically you're paying me to predict the future and I'm not going to sign up for that job. But you know, when they said to me it's about learning about new spaces and increasing our knowledge and being more customer centric, I was like, cool, like I can sign up to that, and that feels like an attainable goal, right? So just those are some things that I've learned.
Yeah.
And
And a
with that,
question,
one more thing, ask about growth. Growth is extremely important, and like understanding what that person's plan is to grow you is really important. And of course, like different Fidelity companies are going to have different things. And so if you're at a startup, they're not going to be like, oh, your growth plan is in 3 years to get assessed. But like knowing that like my first manager I took this job was like, I believe in conferences. Everyone has to have a mentor outside of this job. Everyone needs all these things. And she was really big on like creating an environment of growth and like learning. And that's important. And so making sure you have that as a designer, I think is the most important thing, because the field's constantly changing. And so you can't stay stagnant.
Yeah, and one of the follow-up questions I wanted to ask lastly was like, how do you know when it's time to move on from a job that you're in? And have you ever been in that experience or have had that experience?
When you
So,
stop learning.
oh, go on, Raha, go on.
When you stop learning, that's it for me.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because I see that a lot. The company that I work at is like 5,000 employees right now. But I kind of came in with like a cohort of friends. And now with like the pandemic hitting and some like sort of external influences, and also I feel like the mid-20s are when people are like, what do I do now? You know, where do I go? And some people, and I've had like a lot of conversations with my friends about it, about like, oh, I'm thinking about leaving, I'm interviewing other places. And I kind of had this reflective of, do I want to leave? When do I decide that I want to leave? And kind of like what Raha is saying, it's, are you learning still? Are there opportunities there for you? And if you're comfortable and don't have like any large cons to where you're at right now, what do other opportunities give you? Are you going to grow in a way that you're not growing right now? Do you want to pursue something very different? So I think it's about asking yourself, like, number one, if you're just being treated poorly, then I think you should leave. Like, do not stand for that ever. But if you're kind of thinking, am I stale? Like, am I being stagnant and stagnated? Then maybe you should look for another opportunity. And even before that, if you have the opportunity, ask internally too of what you can do if you're just concerned about your growth. And if they're like, no dice, then pursue something else. Yeah.
Oh, also last thing I wanted to ask was, Sam, I know you went on kind of like a 1-year sabbatical. What kind of prompted that?
Yeah, good question. So I think it was a few things. You know, first off, Ecovative in those early years was pretty intense. You know, typical startup culture, long hours. You know, only a couple weeks a year of vacation time. So I sort of had this pent up wanderlust to travel from that. Second thing is that you know, in the early years of Ecovative, I was doing a lot of different roles and managing teams at various points, and I really felt like if I stepped away from that, then you know, it would really harm the company, and then things would crumble without me. And at that point, the company was, I don't know, 70 people or so, and I was really confident in the teams that I had built, you know, and felt like I could step back and things would be fine. And also, you know, it had been 8 years, and I felt like I wasn't growing as much. You know, I had sort of done it all, and while Ecovative was continuing to grow, I felt like I needed a different perspective. And so I took a leap of faith. And then the last thing is that, you know, I'd saved up money and finally I could afford to do it. And so bought a cheap old sailboat and sailed around the Great American Loop for a year, not really knowing what I was going to do next. Thinking, yeah, I'll probably go back to Ecovative. It was a lot of fun, but keeping my radar tuned to other opportunities. And then, yeah, just laying on a beach one day, read about this Lego opportunity and applied. And the next thing I knew, I was moving to Denmark.
One thing, I think Sam made a lot of great points. One other thing I would add is also, if you're working in a company that doesn't have a growth mindset. I worked for a very small startup where I was employee number 5. And a year and a half, 2 years later, the management team, after the company had grown and we made, you know, a couple $1 million in revenue, I saw them making a lot of the same mistakes that we had made when we were a 5-person company that was bootstrapping. And I think it's important for the company and the culture and the people around you to also have a growth mindset. And so if you start to see signs that like you're just going to be the person fixing problems over and over again, like that's also a great sign. Like, and people ask me, they're like, you helped grow this company from 0 to 1, like, why would you leave? And, you know, you have to ask yourself, like, is this going somewhere, or is this just going to be me doing the same things over and over again, right? So, but it also depends on the point you're in your life, right? If you have other priorities that are not career growth, maybe it's time to take a job where you can just kind of, you know, step back a little bit and like focus on other aspects of your life, you know, that are more important. So.
Yeah, and on that note, you know, enjoying what I'm doing here, but also feeling very far away from family and friends, and so I'm now, you know, starting to look around and say, does it make sense now to come back to the States, and figuring that out. And so as I get older in life now, I've got a kid and a wife, and so it's balancing. You know, we both need to find satisfying jobs in the same area. And also would be nice to be close to family. And so as you get later in your career, you get these other anchors, so you can't sort of follow your career as much as the dominant force. And so I think, especially when you're starting out and earlier in your career, you should be really prioritizing growth. And if you can get a job that you're excited about, that you're doing something you've never done before and you don't fully know how to do it, but they're willing to give you a chance and give you the resources and the time to figure it out, then you should do that. And so, you know, my career has sort of zigzagged from very different roles and very different types of companies. And I feel like I've really grown from that and learned from that. And so I think that's really valuable to focus on getting paid to learn whenever you can.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, the first job you have, you're really bad at your first job. You're not good at it. And I remember, like, I worked weekends and all of that at Quirky just to be as good as like the designer that was a year ahead of me. And it's not required, it's not expected of you to work hard. It's expected of you to be good at your job. And when you come in as a junior person, you're just bad and you need more time. And the more time you put in and the faster you get to that point of your manager being like, great, I don't have to manage you anymore, you can do this stuff on your own, is like, you're so valuable to the company at that point. Before that, you're a huge drag on your manager and a huge pain in the ass. So get to that point as quickly as possible, and like anyone will want you to stay at the company, and you'll have the opportunity to move more and more because you will have learned so much more.
Yeah, thank you for all that, all those pieces of advice. Before we open up our Q&A, do you guys have any last pieces of advice for students who are starting to navigate their careers after DIS?
I'm just gonna say, if I'm honest, I did not have an internship until I was a junior. Like, I think I was doing a lot of soul searching whenever I was like in my freshman and sophomore year. And I think that's totally okay. I was always afraid that I was behind in my process and that I wouldn't end up okay because I just like couldn't get an internship. And I think, you know, previous people have said, you know, all studio projects are a way to build your portfolio. You can do like small passion projects and they don't have to go to full completion and deployment. Like, you can have the ideation for them and acknowledge the constraints and how you would like productionize or produce these things. And I think that is just as important as a completed project, especially like whenever you're just a college student. So I guess what I want to say is, if you're a little different or you're a little, you're at different places in your process than others, like everyone's path here looked completely different, and yours will too. So hopefully we kind of give you some confidence that no matter where you're at, like you'll be able to end up somewhere where you're happy and you're developing, and that you feel like you're a good designer.
Also, you can pretty much go and be whatever you want to be. So like Selena and I do the same job. We have different duals. I'm a mechanical technically. She's a business person. Like Jarek has the same degree that I do, and I don't know what the hell he does. It's very confusing. And so the whole thing is like really whatever you want to be, you can be it. You just need to drive towards it. And so like PDI is great because you can do whatever you want, but it's also sometimes a curse because you can do whatever you want and people get boundless. And so like use that opportunity to like look at things that you're passionate about and try things. And then just know that like you are whatever you want to be. And when you go to interview for jobs, like you're not mechanical who's also a designer. If you want to be a designer, you're a designer who has a mechanical engineering degree, but you're a designer. And so like be confident in that, because people from other schools like CMU and Stanford and stuff aren't coming like sheepishly like, oh, I'm this engineer that could design. Like they're coming in and saying, no, I'm a designer. And like, so are you.
Yeah, I think she just made a great point. I mean, and especially as you get later in your career, like it becomes more so, right? Like, again, I'm very like open and saying most of my work has been in hardware. So one day I got a call from Instagram and they're like, hey, we want to interview you to be a product manager here. And I was like, let me be very, very honest with you. Like I do not have a software background. And they flat out told me, they're like, we are looking for people who can solve complex problems creatively. If you're a good product manager, you can apply those skills, whether you're building a 777 at Boeing or you're working on a piece of consumer tech software. So if you cultivate that mindset, now that may not be what you want to do, but you know, you can literally, like, it's not the way it used to be where there is a very straight linear path, and you know, you can go in a variety of different directions, right? Whether it's being an entrepreneur, whether it's being an entrepreneur and then shifting to a corporate, or going from corporate to startups or startups to whatever. You can do whatever you want, to nonprofits, right? It's really about you using your career to figure out where you want to go. I've probably had more jobs than number of years since I've graduated, which I'm not necessarily always proud of, but like each one of those things got me closer to figuring out what I wanted to do and like where I wanted to go. So it's definitely not going to be a linear path. And you just kind of have to, like many other people have said, like have a goal and a course that you're trying to go on, and, you know, be ready to roll with the punches or whatever, you know, deal with uncertainty when it comes. So.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and
Oh, go ahead,
I'm
Emma.
just gonna add one thing on that. So I think based on that too, it's like important to like know what you're good at, but then also like listen to others like who tell you that you might be good at a job. Like I was only applying to like, you know, design jobs with just design in them, and like that's great, but also there's other jobs. Like I said, my first job I got at the career fair, like someone was like looking at my resume, they're like, okay, projects, stakeholders, timelines, like all those buzzwords, and they're like, that's, you know, what this job is. And I'm like, okay, great. Like, and that's the part that I think I knew I was good at, but also someone told me like I would never know. Like I was a business analyst. Like my dual was not business. That's kind of like a fluff word that they use for the description, but they really are doing at the core like designing and working with people and things like that. They just don't really know it. So I think like listening, you know, when others call on you and might think that you'd be good at a job, like being open to that as well.
Thank you for all of your guys' advice. I know that sometimes students can feel lost or a little stuck in the job that they land straight after college. So I know that your words provide a little comfort. We wanted to move into a bit of a Q&A session. I wanted to start off with a question from Angela Fu, who had asked, what's the best advice you have for maintaining and following up on networking connections you've made before, especially within the DIS community?
So my year has a Snapchat group, and so does the year under me that I'm both in, and so we talk all the time. But when it comes to like people who like you don't talk to normally or aren't like joking around with, a lot of it is like reaching out with mutual intent or mutual opportunity. And so you don't want to reach out to someone and be like, hey, I need this thing from you, can you provide it? But like you can say like, hey, your job is really interesting and I want to learn more, can we just chat and like get to know each other? But like don't make it about you, make it about like how both of you can benefit from that situation. And then also like, just don't be nervous to reach out to someone randomly on LinkedIn that's a PDI person and be like, hey, what's up? Rachel Ginn, who works for Rivian, reached out to me months ago and she was like, hey, I work for Rivian. What do you do? Can we talk? I'm just interested in your job. And like, we got on a call, I'd never met her, had a great time. And so like, don't be nervous about doing stuff like that either, because PDIs will generally answer one another.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think the key is not to come across like you're not to have a transactional mindset, just in general, right? It's not really, I mean, most people are willing to help, but if they feel like, you're just reaching out to them because you want to get something from them, you know, that's usually, that's the one piece of advice I would give. Try to get to know them, like, even just like an enjoyable conversation in exchange for a lead on a job or something is going to go a long way.
Great, thank you. And another question we had received earlier from Lana Weiss was, do you have any recommendations for someone to go for interview practice? I know, Emma, you mentioned the CCPD. Was there anywhere else you guys have used for interview practice? Maybe your professors, your peers, anything like that?
Interview for jobs you don't want.
And yeah, apply for a lot of jobs, and especially ones you don't want.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That's a great piece of advice.
I just kind of practice with my friends.
Oh,
like, no, it's okay. I was kind of a bad student in the aspect that I didn't go to the career center ever, which is probably not a great call. But practicing with friends, just like, I don't know, I do this thing where I looked at my resume and I was like, okay, if they ask me about this project, what do I want to emphasize here, right? And just going through and like mocking with yourself of, if they ask me about this thing, what am I going to say? Like, they ask me about this, what am I going to say? And just thinking through your answers, like just a little bit. You don't have to write out a script. You don't have to be super strategic or analytical about it, but at least have some like semblance of, this is the thread I want to weave and how I want to go about it.
And present your portfolio to designers or whatever you are. Present your portfolio to your industry and then out of your industry. If it doesn't make sense to both of them, you've done something very wrong and you need to like figure out what that is. But you're going to be presenting as a designer to engineers, and you do portfolio reviews and vice versa. And so you want to make sure that people in your industry understand it and people outside of it.
I see another current question in the chat from Nancy. She says, thank you all for this valuable mentoring of our current students. Now, how can we reach future students like the high school senior version of you? How can we find students for whom DIS will be a great fit? What are your ideas?
I kind of touched on this earlier, but when I went to like the RPI open house, like before I chose a major, and like what I was saying, like someone told me it was like the fun engineering, and I don't want to say like, oh, just get people who are fun, but I do think that finding people who look at learning as like fun and they're like curious and want to think that way is like a good place to start.
So I remember being asked a similar question at RPI when I was there. And I think that the way, this is going to sound very controversial, the way we teach engineering is broken. There's a lot of people with raw talent and interest, and a lot of the culture around engineering education is weeding people out and teaching them a bunch of, I'm just going to say it, useless theory, and not allowing them to understand how things actually like are applied in the real world. I think it's an education problem across the board in general. But I think, I think that I don't know that I have an answer, like a straightforward answer here. But I think expanding kind of the like empowering people that want to create things and equipping them with the skills is really kind of what DFS should be about, or sorry, not DFS. My brain's not working right now. DIS should really be about, and like attracting those people who really want to understand why and kind of bring these different pieces together. And a lot of times they don't fit into a mold. Like I remember at RPI, people were like, are you an EMAC or architecture student? And I was like, no. And most of my friends were not engineering students because, we just had very different perspectives on how we looked at things. So I don't know, it's hard to kind of say, like, in some ways, I think it's a self-selecting group of people because I don't find too many people, even out in the real world, who think about things the way many of us do. but I honestly think these skills are more and more important given like the interconnected and interdisciplinary nature of like how the world is changing, right? So I don't know.
I agree with the self-selecting piece. I do think that RPI could do a lot better job though of making it apparent that DIS exists. I applied to Lehigh for their D-Arts program and I got in, and so I'm not going to Lehigh obviously, but I had no idea that we had a comparative. And so like, I think the big issue is that people, like students just don't know that we exist until they're on campus. And then there's like this mad dash to be like, oh, there's this thing, let me get in.
Hi. We have another question. Go ahead, Angela.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I had a question. So, this is me again, Angela. So this is open to all panelists. If in case I miss anyone, but I know Sam and Lucas, you two had specifically mentioned like at some time working abroad at some points in your careers. If not right now, also. So, do any of you have advice for someone looking to work abroad at some point, or have you noticed any particular things in working with, I guess, like a different culture, different environment?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic experience to work abroad if you can. And there's like this special aura of telling people like, I come here from New York. There's just something special about New York, and they don't see the difference between New York State and New York City. It's just all New York, so it doesn't matter. So I think in a lot of the world, like coming from New York, you're like this special exotic person wherever you land, and so that's really cool. And then I think yeah, it's just a fantastic experience to live and work in a different culture, if that's something that suits your life and your interests. So to me, I've learned and grown a lot from particularly the job at Lego, which was very international. So there's people from 70 different countries or something, working at the head office, and so got to really yeah, just learn a lot about the world and about interacting with different kinds of people. And I think that we're also really fortunate that English is the business language of most of the world. So it's remarkably easy, and you'll have a leg up and be the clearest communicator in rooms of people who might not be native English speakers. So it's you have these special advantages on your side, and it's a super cool opportunity when the world opens up, and if you have those opportunities.
Yeah, I'd second that. It's an amazing opportunity. It really shows you how important communication is when you're working with people who don't speak your native language, or I was working in Hong Kong and people are speaking Cantonese and Mandarin. And you learn how to communicate with arrows and like PowerPoint, and like you realize how important that is, and that's happening constantly while I was dealing with people who were mainly technical but spoke different languages. You're always going to be dealing with people who speak different languages, even if they're all speaking English. They may be technical or non-technical. So really it's trial by fire on how to communicate with someone through arrows and PowerPoint. I would also say it took me a really long time to work abroad. I had the opportunity to work at a product development firm in high school, actually, as an intern, and they had a Hong Kong office, and I always knew that's what I wanted to do. And it took me 6 years of like actively trying to get out there, and multiple jobs where I didn't get the opportunity, between Hasbro, Quirky, and it took until after that to actually get out to Hong Kong to work abroad. So it takes a long time. So start planning for it and start designing your career if that's something you really want to do.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Yeah. So another question we had in chat from Marta she said, thank you so much for sharing your insights and advice. We spent some time talking about skills. What are your top 2 to 3 most transferable skills that you got out of the DIS PDI program that you were able to best apply in your career?
Question everything, be collaborative, be empathetic, and be empathetic for your coworkers too, right? Because like you might disagree, but they're also just trying to get where you're trying to get.
Yeah, kind of on the last point that Raha just said about like empathy. This is kind of one lesson that I think PDI instills very well. Is I was like having this conversation with one of my friends that wants to go into design like post university, and she asked, how do you present your designs and not feel personally offended whenever people like tear your work apart, you know? And I think how PDI and DIS really situates your knowledge is if you're creating a product or your design is missing something and somebody disagrees, then there's missing information there, right? It's not about like, oh, I purposely did this, but there's some sort of like nugget that I'm missing that this person sees that I don't. And so I think viewing disagreements in terms of I'm just not seeing it from their lens it was a huge lesson for me, and comes in handy very much day to day.
All right, thank you, everyone. And just for a really quick last question, we are running short here on time, but we'd like to hear from people who have had higher pressure to get post-grad opportunities, for example, having no fallbacks, tons of debt, and how you've managed your stress and responsibility while still trying to develop your careers meaningfully. If anyone wants to provide any insight into that, I think that would be really helpful for students right now and in post-grad life.
I guess I can speak on that. Yeah, I went completely like cold turkey from my family when I got to college. And so I pretty much had to get a full-time job and was supporting myself like from there on out. And so I viewed my junior year internship as I'm going to try very hard to get an internship and get a job from this internship. Like that is my goal for this opportunity. And so I think we spoke about this a little earlier in terms of your first job is not going to be your end all be all. If you can get a foothold in the door, I think that's the most important part. After you get your first job, you have a salary to bargain with, you have a experience to bargain with, and you're more useful because you've just been industry after you get your first job. So I think it's, if you don't have any fallback or any support or need to, get going, I think it's hard to make sacrifices. And if you have specific boxes that you need to be checked, check those first. And then once you have the more like quote unquote luxury to think further, then you can, and if folks want advice, feel free to talk to me after this as well.
All right, thank you, everyone. We are trying to be respectful of everyone's time. So I do want to just thank the whole panel for speaking with me and Nampoina and the rest of the guests who have joined us, and hand it on off to Raquel to give us some final words.
Hi, everyone, me again. I'm again just so grateful to all of our alumni for being here today, to the alumni who have helped organize this. I see that Selena did manage to join us in the end. Selena, thank you for all of your work in this. I just wanted to thank you directly for this. I'm trying to be respectful of people's time and wrap this up at 5 p.m. sharp. If our panelists are happy to have emails sent to them, just for additional advice, would you mind dropping that in the chat? I'll also be sending a follow-up email to all of our alumni, to the alumni panelists, because I did record this, but without your permission. So I want to get your permission for actually potentially sharing this publicly and adding a little introduction and spiel of what all of this was about. But if everybody, also thank you, Nampoina, I was actually gonna do that too, so that's perfect. We do have a Design at RPI Discord that was student started and a student admin, which is super exciting. We have a lot of alumni there. If you would like to join us in that little community, that would be wonderful. But honestly, without further ado, I would like to release all of us. It's 5 p.m. EST. And keeping to time is a really good practice in this day and age in the pandemic. So once again, thank you to all of our panelists. I'm gonna stop recording and release all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You
Bye.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Be well, everybody.
Thanks.
Hi, Eva.